Welcome to my glass bookcase of treasures. This is the first video I'm going to do in a series about my most treasured books. Today we're going to start with the bottom shelf. Where my big heavy books go. It's also where my general reference books go. But before we get into that, I'd like to give a shout out to Celeste at a book reader's Almanac with Celeste Schantz. I watched her Cinemarch book tag about reading books about movies or reading novels based on movies or reading books about actors. She had a lot of interesting suggestions. You could do the challenge either very simply or you could do it in a complicated way with a lot of different choices. I chose the simple route. After watching a movie on Netflix, I realized while doing research for the current book I'm working on that book was actually based on a novel. So I decided for Celeste's challenge that I would read that book and that I would read a biography about the author who wrote it. The novel is called The Bookshop by Penelope Fitzgerald. I also decided to read the biography of the author, Penelope Fitzgerald, A Life by Hermione Lee. I enjoyed that biography so much that I've decided that I'm going to read every biography Hermione Lee wrote, and I'm also going to read every novel that Penelope Fitzgerald ever wrote. As a matter of fact, Penelope Fitzgerald wrote a few biographies herself, but we won't get into that right now. Anyway, the challenge opened up a whole new world of possibilities to me, and I'd like to thank Celeste for that. I'll link Celeste's channel in my description box below. She reads a little bit of everything, and I really enjoy her warm style and the interesting takes she gives on the books that she reads, both old and new. Now back to my bottom shelf. I don't arrange my books strictly at home. I mean, who has time for that? I do like to put them together roughly by subject area, but the reason that I put all my big heavy reference books on this bottom shelf is because it's the only shelf I have in my house that actually has room for them. Today I'm going to cover the first 5 titles on that shelf. The first is a 2-volume set. And it's very heavy. The first, it's called The Lincoln Library of Essential Information, and there are 2 volumes. It's not an encyclopedia. It looks a little bit like it could be a concise encyclopedia, and it is supposed to cover a broad range of human knowledge. I used to explain to my students, my 8th graders, that encyclopedias were kind of like the Google of my day. You know, that's where you went to find information on everything. The way this book differs is that it just has 10 main subject areas. I think it's 10, I haven't counted, but roughly 10 main subject areas of human knowledge. And I'm going to read you what they are right now, just so you'll know if you're curious. First, they have geography, economics, history, government and politics, which is 1, education, English language, literature, fine arts, mathematics, science, biography, and miscellany. For each one of those sections, it doesn't, take words that correspond to that, like coefficients for mathematics or something like that, and then give you a definition of that. That's not the way this is arranged. It gives you an overview of the entire field and what was known about it up until 1985, which is the copyright date of the one I have. And by the way, I picked this up at a library sale. Libraries do, clear out their books occasionally, and library sales are great places to pick up used books. But back to the format of this book. It will give you an overview, and then it goes off into the different branches. So it kind of gives you the big picture, and then it branches off into smaller subdivisions of that topic. And it also provides a bibliography on each one so that you have ideas of books to read. But what I think is really valuable about this set is that it gives you keywords that you can use to go off and do your own research. If you're an autodidact, this is a wonderful thing because this book makes it very clear exactly what names of topics and keywords that you would need to do searches on databases and libraries or on the internet. It also gives you a serious section of study on each one, which I just think is awesome. And while a lot of this information is outdated, it's still valuable just for those overviews. It's also a great source for getting ideas to research and write on if you like to research and write. And the indexes are excellent. The bibliographies are, while I said they're older books, most of them are probably in in the 1960s, just looking through it. I enjoy reading some of those older books. Sometimes I think they have invaluable information. I think a little bit of the time with the internet, some of our information has been degraded. And the reason that it's like that is because people just tend to, when information is so easy, when it's easy to copy and paste, a lot of times people just copy and paste information. And so things that are not quite right or have been superseded are still passed along on the internet, just like a game of telephone, if you can remember those games. They're passed along and they're no longer relevant, they're no longer accurate, or maybe they never were, but people often believe them just because they find them on the internet. So these older books had to really research and prove that what they were passing along was correct. And so I think they sometimes are really good things to read if you want a base of knowledge on something, and it doesn't have to be super recent and up to date. The nice thing about older books like this is that you can get them used. Often you can get them newer versions on Amazon or in bookstores. Sometimes you can get them in bookstores, but sometimes they're free. And you can get free copies of older editions of this book free online. You can also buy used copies at a marginal price. I'm going to link some of these below for all the books that I talk about today. The link I'm going to share to the one about the Lincoln Essential Library is from eBook House Library online. The second book I'm going to talk about is The History of Art by H.W. Janson. This copy is the third edition, and it was published in 1986. It was a gift for my brother for Christmas in 1987, and he even inscribed it at the beginning for me, which makes it doubly valuable to me. Part of what my brother put on the inscription is, "It is a literary treasure and a visual delight." And it really is. Now this book is on its 8th edition, and that was published in 2015. The fellow that wrote it, H.W. Janson, was a Russian-American art history scholar, and it was his aim to introduce the novice, like me, to the wonders of art so that we can understand what's so great about it. It's not written for scholars, it's written for the average person. I was reading some reviews of this on Goodreads, and one of the people on there said that when she was a senior in high school, that book was her boyfriend because she took it with her everywhere she went. I thought that was great. It provides black and white pictures, and I'm just going to show you pictures that I take with my camera rather than try to hold that book up because it is so heavy. It provides lots of black and white pictures of works of art and occasional color plates, and then it examines what's so great about them on the page so you can look at the picture while you read the description. It's really nice in that way, and it's also very well written. It's not hard to understand. You don't have to be an expert to get what he's trying to describe. One reviewer said that while it may not make you appreciate all the art included, it will definitely help you understand it. And it's a hefty book. It's close to 800 pages, but you know, it's readable if you want to read the entire thing. It's now available online through Rebel and Pearson Custom Library, and I don't know much about them. I would imagine those are paid subscriptions, but older editions can also be downloaded through the Internet Archive. It does tend to have a Western culture bias, but it's still a beautiful book, and it has a lovely little timeline at the beginning. The next book on my shelf is The Riverside Shakespeare. Is this not a gorgeous book? The edition, there are several different versions of this book online, but the one I have is the Houghton Mifflin Scholarly Edition, which was published in 1974, and there's a reason I have that. It's called the Riverside Edition, of course, because Shakespeare's plays were often performed at the Globe Theatre and the Blackfriars Theatre in London, both of which are on the Thames River. I was required to get this book for a class I took on Shakespeare's comedies in 1981. My professor's name, and I'm not making this up, was Dr. Funstein. Dr. Funstein. How about that for an interesting coincidence? I loved the class and I loved him. It was just a great experience. But at the time before I started the class, I was a little bit upset about it because the book cost $75, which I know is nothing for a textbook today. But in 1981, I had very little money, and that was a lot of money. And to top that off, the book weighs in at around 10 pounds. And I lived on a very hilly campus, so it was really a pain to lug to class. But but, now I'm really grateful that he made us buy it. What a privilege to own a book like this. And now it costs well over $200 a copy. You can get them used much cheaper, of course. Not every edition of the Riverside Shakespeare, I'll have to make clear, is a scholarly edition like this one. Some of them just contain the works with, a few comments about them. What's so great about this one to me, though, is the scholarly information in it. It has wonderful, detailed information about Shakespearean scholarship in the introduction. Each play is introduced with a scholarly critical essay. It has lots of footnotes and aids to help you understand the language and also, of course, what the play was referring to. I mean, there are things that they used in their everyday life that we no longer use today. It explains all that. It's arranged by the comedies first, then the histories, the tragedies, the romances, and finally all his poems. My copy, you can tell by looking at it, is not particularly heavily used. I love to watch Shakespeare's plays on the stage and on the screen, but I don't especially enjoy reading the plays, and I know that's a pity. I should do better. The next book up is Bartlett's Familiar Quotations. I bought the copy I have at a remainder sale in the 1980s, and I bought it for the sheer joy of owning it. Mine is the revised and enlarged 15th and 25th anniversary edition. It cost me $6.50, and you can tell I've used this book a lot. It's very well loved and well worn. The book was first published in 1855 by John Bartlett, and he ran the University Bookstore in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which of course is where Harvard is. And as you might guess, he was a seasoned and prolific reader. His quote, which I found this on Bartleby.com. If you don't know about Bartleby, you really should look it up. I'll link it below. His quote is, "I have gathered a posy of other men's flowers, and nothing but the thread that binds them is my own." Oh, I love that quote. And of course, posy is kind of an outdated term now, but when I was young, people still used it. A posy just means that, you're gathering up flowers and things. So what he's saying is, the words in this book are not mine. It's just that I gathered them together. That's my contribution. He's a man after my own heart. The index at the beginning of my volume allows you to look up the quotes by specific authors. And then the quotes are arranged in rough chronological order. And of course, they can't be very specific about this. On some, they're not sure exactly when the person said it or, exactly when the person lived sometimes. It's very hard to be exact. But they do arrange it from earliest to latest, except the very last section is by anonymous. These are the most recent quotes from the edition I bought. I'm just going to read a couple of them, but I think it's fun to do this. "You are the sunshine of my life. That's why I'll always stay around." Stevie Wonder, 1972. Down on me, down on me. Looks like everybody in this whole world is down on me. Janis Joplin, 1967. The index at the very end is an index of first lines of different quotes, and the index is hundreds of pages long. Now, of course, you can find Bartlett's Familiar Quotations online, and you can even get an app for it on the Apple Store. And you can also get it at the Literature Network, and you can download older copies at Project Gutenberg. I'll link all that below. The last book I'm going to talk about today is Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable. I got this at the same place and at the same time that I got my copy of Bartlett's. This one cost me $4.50. This book was originally put together by a man named, let me get this straight, Ebenezer Cobham Brewer from Norwich in Britain. And he was a man after my own heart. His father was a school teacher, and so was he to begin with. And he liked to collect things. I mean, that was just what he was all about. He really enjoyed collecting things. His first major published work was A Guide to the Scientific Knowledge of Things Familiar, which was questions and answers about everything in life, like why is snow white, that kind of thing. Most of his books were educational. This book was first published in 1894, and he called it a treasury of literary bric-a-brac. Let's see how he defined that. Odds and ends of curiosities. And then it goes on to the French word, the French phrase that it came from. I don't speak French, so I'm not going to do that and embarrass myself. But it was a seller of junk, old stores, usually of small value. But anyway, that's his definition of bric-a-brac, and that's what he says his book is about. Now, the Oxford reference site today says that this book is a blend of language, culture, myth, and legend. My copy was published in 1981, and I do occasionally just like to dip into it for fun. It's a wonderful browsing browsing experience. One person on Goodreads said that it's a desert island book. If you only have one book to take with you, this is the book they would take. If you're a serious fiction writer, you might try browsing a copy just to see if you can get some ideas for future writing projects. I mean, it is a great place to spark ideas in your head and to cross-reference things in your experience. It's hard to describe, but it covers just about everything from myth and legend and literature from the past. Now it's in its 20th edition, and the 2019 edition costs $55 new on Amazon. But now there's one for the 20th century. There's a modern phrase and fable and a concise 20th century phrase and fable. So you can get them in all sorts of different areas. The old editions can be downloaded on the Internet Archive site and also Info Please. So I'll link those below. Search around for other places to find it too. I mean, it really is the sort of thing that if you like to read or write, you ought to have it in your collection if you can. So that's the first half of my bottom bookshelf of my glass case of literary treasures. What did you think? Are there any old reference books in your collection that you'd never part with? Let me know in a comment below. And I'd also like to know if you're a reference nerd. If you are, hi, let's get to know each other. If you'd like to see more book reviews, hit like and subscribe. And if you love nonfiction and would like to have a portable library of recommended titles on every topic going back a century, check out my book, Library Lens Curated Collection of Superlative Nonfiction. I'll leave links to my book and the books mentioned in the video below. I do get a small commission if you use my link to purchase. So that's it today. Until next time, happy reading.